Assalamu alaikum, peace be upon you. Assalatu wassalamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. I recently watched a show which is focused on political analysis, where the host reported how citizens were suffering under an Islamic government. He then started reading an email from a viewer who was proposing an effective process to beat this dictatorship, which is to discredit them on what they claim to represent and what they claim to be the expert in, which is in this case Islam. In other words, beat them at their own game. The viewer was proposing the way to eliminate these autocratic rules is by showing their support base, who lack true Quranic knowledge, that the current rulers in charge do not represent Islam because their actions contradict the Quranic teachings. Educate their support base what the Quran truly teaches, because they have been taught to follow these so-called religious leaders blindly in most cases. Once these despotic governments lose their support base, they will crumble and fall because the rest of the country is already seeking their downfall. This is in a nutshell what the viewer was proposing, as I understood it. Then the host stopped reading the email and said, and I'm paraphrasing, "This viewer now shows his true color," implying he's one of those religious ones stuck in a 1400 years old book, and continued with emotion, "Stop it. Enough is enough. How long do you want to continue referring to a book that has no relevance today? Do you want me to quote example verses from the Quran?" He didn't, but continued and said, "How is the Quran going to address today's problems and issues? This is the age of science. Only science can resolve man's problems and challenges." His guest made additional comments on the show, which we will cover in the next lecture. In this lecture, as well as the next, we want to address the following relevant questions. Is science the answer? Does science have the solution for everything? What is the role of science in man's life today versus the role of religion? What is Islamic position on science? And is there a contradiction between Islam and science? What is the role of religion, Islam in this case, in man's life? And is it outdated? Has science replaced it? Before we start answering these questions, we should clarify the following points relating to what we said, we said earlier, what was said in the show. Number one, if there is a so-called Islamic government, an Islamic group, a cult, or anything with the title Islamic, does not mean it is in fact Islamic. If an Islamic group or government is doing anything that is against teachings of Islam, the Quran, and the common sense, their actions or policies cannot be attributed to Islam. The issue is, who is going to go and investigate or confirm? Who has the right intention without any bias to do so? Most of these political show hosts and their guests are not expert in Islam nor the Quran, which is the constitution of Islam. Yet they make comments as if they are, and then they attack Islam. If they take the time and ask the experts, they will know the truth to be different. The same goes to the supporters of these so-called Islamic groups or governments. Knowledge is power. If they are interested in scholarly analysis, the truth is easily within their reach. Number two, Just as no scientific book or theory claims to be divine, revealed by God, no holy book claims to be a scientific book. The Quran is not a book of science, in spite of so many verses that point out scientific facts, incite people to think, to observe, to rationalize, to use their minds. Nor is it a book of philosophy. The Quran embodies an open talk between God and His creation, mankind. It asserts a cause and effect relationship, that law of requital is at work at every aspect of life, and that man only needs to keep it in the view if he wants to avoid the life's pitfalls and live in peace with himself and at peace with the surrounding relations. In other words, the Quran's main purpose is to tell us about the relationship between God and man and man and his own subconscious. It is a book that guides us to conduct our lives in this world. Its ideology instills the spirit of humanity. Number 3, nothing mentioned in the Quran is anti-science. If the Quran does not confirm or mention a scientific fact, it does not contradict it either. On the contrary, many scientific facts mentioned or prophesied in the Quran have been confirmed by the science in recent years. Not that they need to be for a believer, of course. Hence, the Quran and science can coexist and each fulfill their goals. No contradictions between them. I will mention a few examples here, but for more details, you can refer to a past lecture called Scientific Confirmation of the Quranic Verses. The Quranic verses highlight in simple words the process in creation of many things in order to draw our attention to the presence and works of our Creator and the purpose for these creations. Today's science, especially in the last 100 years, is confirming some of these Quranic revelations sent down 1400 years ago. The Quran provides a basis for the development of philosophy of nature, thus a perspective to the philosophy of science. It awakens human curiosity and instills a spirit of inquiry in all those who adopt Islam as their way of life. Deductively, then the Quran encourages mankind to engage in the pursuit of science. More on this later. With above clarifications in mind, let's start answering the questions we mentioned earlier. In the world we are living, some people, especially in the West, think that the scientific discoveries and the advancement in technology somehow religion has become irrelevant or obsolete, and that religion really belongs to centuries ago, or as time moves forward, religion gets older and older, hence irrelevant and often useless. This, coupled with the historic backdrop of the church and what happened in Europe, which makes it easier to reach such a conclusion. As you know, the church had an immense influence and essentially ruled Europe for several centuries and advocated that pursuit of scientific knowledge was the cause of the original sin. The bishops drew their evidence from the Old Testament, where it is mentioned that when Adam ate at the tree and gained some knowledge, God was displeased with him and denied him mercy. In other words, the tree Adam, peace be upon him, was forbidden to eat from was the tree of knowledge, scientific knowledge. Therefore, was rejected entirely by the church and considered as taboo. Throughout this time, the scientists were persecuted. Finally, when the Western freethinkers and scientists were able to overcome the power of the church, they took revenge by going to the opposite direction, other extreme, by suppressing any power or ruling of the religion, and kept church's influence in a confined corner. As a result of all the above, when you discuss the issue of religion and science with a Westerner, he cringes in disbelief and doubt. Unfortunately, some from Muslim countries have joined them for the same reasons. Today, it is almost impossible for most Western thinkers to accept the fact that there may be a meeting ground, common ground between the religion and science, particularly when they do not know about Islam. And again, that includes some Muslims and non-Muslims from Muslim countries. They do not know that Islam holds a very high status for knowledge and people with knowledge. Islam regards them as witnesses to the fact that there is none worthy of worship except God, as Allah Himself says in the Quran in chapter 3, Allah bears witness that there is no God except He, and so do the angels and those endowed with knowledge. By people of knowledge, the verse does not mean religious scholars, rather scientists, like physical scientists. Those who will see these signs and appreciate them. Of course, here we're talking about the scientists who are unbiased, those who analyze these signs in order to realize the Creator's existence. And of course, it is about scientists who are exposed to Quranic verses. By the way, regarding the story of Adam, peace be upon him, the Quran disagrees with the current version of the Bible, which is another thing Westerners need to know. According to the Quran, the fact that Adam, peace be upon him, was given knowledge is a mark of honor and privilege, not the cause of his expulsion. Hence, if one discusses Islam and science with Western thinkers, they tend to expect an argument similar to their own religious understanding. That's why they react with surprise when they hear Islam's position on science and knowledge, and are surprised when they are presented with the crystal clear scientific facts presented in the Quran. If any notion that the Quran inhibited science was correct, science should have been dead soon after the advent of Islam and the Quran. On the contrary, we see science flourished and Muslims became masters of science for several centuries. The defining evidence and event that provided the foundation for this mastery was the revelation and encouragement of the Quranic verses. Like in chapter 39, we read, "Are those who have knowledge and those who have no knowledge alike? Only the men of understanding are mindful." Or in chapter 29, "And such are the parables we coin for mankind, but only those with knowledge understand them." The following narrations of the Prophet ﷺ supplement the assertion of the Quran about knowledge. Quote, "To seek knowledge is a religious duty for every Muslim man and woman. The ink of the scholar is more sacred than the blood of the martyr. Seek knowledge from the cradle to grave. The best form of worship is the pursuit of knowledge. Scholars should endeavor to spread knowledge and provide education to people who have been deprived of it. for where knowledge is hidden, it disappears. So this is the contrast between the Westerners' way of thinking about religion and science versus ours. Theirs is that religion is old and irrelevant when it comes to science and the advancement today. From our Islamic perspective, we think people need religion and divine teachings now more than ever. Some people ask, what is so important about the Quranic verses when in fact they seem so simplistic and elementary? For example, خَلَقَ السَّمَاوَاتِ بِغَيْرِ عَمَدٍ تَرَوْنَهَا. He created the heavens without any pillars that you can see. What does it mean? Sometimes later, after Islam and the Quran, Isaac Newton said there is a force called gravity that exists between Earth and the sun and the moon and other stars. Hence, discovering what the pillars that cannot be seen in the verse meant. The existence of the gravitational constant was explored by various researchers from the mid-17th century, helping Isaac Newton, who formulated his law of universal gravitation. Then there are several verses about human development through embryonic stages, fairly in detail, which was not possible to see or analyze in stages until recent years. Like this verse, we created man from the extract of clay, then we made him a drop in a place of rest, firmly fixed, then we made the drop into a clinging cloth, and we made the cloth into a lump, and then we made from the lump bones, and we covered the bones with flesh, and we developed him into another creation. None of the above was known 1400 years ago until this revelation, and only discovered recently using advanced equipment and powerful scopes. Just to give an idea, Ham and Leeuwenhoek were the first scientists to observe human sperm cells using an improved microscope in 1677, more than 1,000 years after Muhammad, peace be upon him. Before which, they mistakenly thought that the sperm cell contained a miniature preformed human being that grew when it was deposited in the female tract, womb. Reported in a book called The Developing Human by Keith Moore and Persad. When scientists confirmed through scientific discoveries and powerful instruments the human development stages in mother's womb, we realized what these verses really mean. Here are a few examples of what scientists have said about these revealing Quranic verses. Dr. E. Marshall Johnson is a professor emeritus of anatomy and developmental biology at Thomas Jefferson University. He has authored more than 200 publications in anatomy. In presenting his research paper, he said, quote, in summary, the Quran describes not only the development of external form, but emphasizes the internal stages, the stages inside the embryo of its creation and development, emphasizing major events recognized by contemporary science, unquote. Dr. Gerald C. Gordinger is the course director and professor of embryology at School of Medicine in Georgetown University. He said, quote, in a relatively few verses, the Quran contains rather comprehensive description of human development stages. No such distinct and complete record of human development, such as classification, terminology, and description existed previously, and in most of, if not all instances, this description precedes by many centuries the recording of the various stages of human embryonic and fetal development recorded in the traditional scientific literature, unquote. Dr. William Hay is a well-known professor of geological science at the University of Colorado. He said, quote, "I find it very interesting that this sort of information is in the ancient scriptures of the Quran, Holy Book Quran, and I have no way of knowing where they came from, but I think it is extremely interesting that they are in the Quran, and that this work is going on to discover the meaning of some of the passages," unquote. And when he was asked about the source of the Quran, he replied, quote, "Well, I would think it must be the divine being," unquote. Therefore, the more science moves toward, forward and goes, the more it's going to confirm and put its signature on the Quranic verses, and many more to be discovered as science provides the means, the tools, the instruments by which we can rediscover the amazing Quran and signs of Allah. All it takes is a bit of fairness and a bit of unbiased reflection on the Quranic verses. In summary, there are many verses in the Quran that clearly point out these scientific facts or prophecies without having to force a meaning or impose a desired meaning or interpretation. And as the science advances, there will be more scientific facts to be discovered from the Quran. And that is why the Quran says in chapter 22, "And so that those to whom knowledge has been given will know that this Quran is the truth from your Lord." Or in chapter 58, "Allah will raise up in ranks those who believed among you and those who have been given knowledge." Here again, knowledge is not about religious knowledge, rather other knowledge, like natural science, that is, physical scientists will know this book is the truth. Hence, combine knowledge with belief. This is why the Quran must be studied and be reflected upon more than ever. It is not about some terrorist or extremist defining or defending Islam. It is about letting the Quranic proof, knowledge, and reason do the job. Islam is the only faith that insists and encourages seeking knowledge, reflection, using intellect, and holds scholars and scientists in high regard. There are waves and waves of verses in the Quran asking people to reflect, to use their reason and intellect, or people of knowledge. The Quran places immense emphasis on scientific knowledge. The first Quranic word revealed to Muhammad, peace be upon him, was read. It refers, among other forms of reading, to reading the signs of God or the systematic study of nature. It is a basic tenet of Islamic belief that the material world is full of signs of God, and these signs can be deciphered only through rational and objective inquiry. A large portion of the Quran is devoted to the praise of scientific knowledge, objective inquiry, and serious study of the material world. The Quran teaches its readers to make a prayer, asking, "God, increase me in knowledge." It was the religious impulse that propelled science in Muslim civilization during the classical period from the 8th to 15th centuries. It is the neglect of science that has plunged the contemporary Muslim world in poverty and underdevelopment. So, as one can see, not only the Quran does not contradict science and knowledge, it encourages gaining knowledge, information, and using science for recognition. Keep in mind, as Muslims, we believe in the Quran as a whole, and we believe that all verses are untouched and exact words of God, telling the truth. Therefore, we do not confirm the science with the Quran, rather look at science as a confirmation of the facts revealed in the Quran 14 centuries ago, or as a tool to perhaps explain some verses. While the Quran never contradicted what the science says, there are many scientific signs in the Quran that science has not proven yet. The Quran aims to point out wonders of the creation in many things and in many ways in order to draw our attention to Tawheed, oneness of our Creator and His favor upon us, so that we worship Him alone and thank Him alone and utilize what He has given us for betterment of mankind, our environment, and preparedness for the next life. We will continue answering the remaining questions: role of Islam, role of science, on what the show host and his guests talked about in the next lecture, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.